All right, strap yourselves in, because today we are diving headfirst into Revelation.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, chapter 9.
Uh-huh.
And, this chapter has a bit of a reputation.
It does.
It's often called the scariest chapter in the whole Bible.
Yeah. And, even if you aren't, super religious,
Yeah.
I think there's just something about this kind of apocalyptic imagery that just gets to people.
It sticks with you.
It does. It really does.
So that's what we're going to dig into today.
Yes.
We're going to look at all the symbolism, the historical context,
Uh-huh.
and try and figure out why this chapter has resonated with people for centuries.
Exactly.
And the guide that we're using for this deep dive is an online article
Okay.
called Revelation 9 is the scariest chapter in the Bible. Stay home if you see this.
Okay.
So I'm already a little creeped out.
Well, it's interesting because Revelation is almost like a puzzle box, full of symbols and metaphors and all these historical connections.
So how do we even begin to unpack this thing?
Well, I think first we need to lay some groundwork.
Okay.
Remember that Revelation was written by John the Apostle, most likely towards the end of the 1st century.
Okay.
And this was during a time when Christians were facing a lot of persecution under the Roman Empire.
Right.
So you got to imagine living under this regime that is hostile to everything you believe.
Right.
And you're looking for some hope.
Yeah.
And you're looking for a vision of a world where things are going to get better.
Yeah, where justice prevails.
Exactly. And that's where Revelation comes in.
So it's not just some kind of abstract prediction of the future.
Yeah.
It's rooted in a very specific time.
Absolutely. It comes from a very real historical experience.
Yeah, okay.
And it's also important to understand that Revelation uses a lot of symbols to communicate some very complex ideas.
The decoded message.
Exactly like a coded message.
Okay.
And some of those symbols are pretty straightforward, like a dragon representing the devil,
Oh, okay.
or a lake of fire symbolizing hell.
Gotcha.
But others are a lot more subtle.
Oh.
It's kind of like those old spy movies.
I love those.
Yeah, where they have those cryptic messages, and they need the decoder ring to actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, in a way, Revelation is its own decoder ring sometimes.
Okay.
It'll actually explain the symbols within the text itself.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, so for example, stars represent angels,
Okay.
and candlesticks actually symbolize churches.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a language that takes some getting used to.
Right.
But once you start to see those patterns, it opens up this whole other layer of meaning.
It's like learning a secret code.
It is.
Okay, so we've got this book
Yeah.
written in code, full of intense imagery,
Right.
and rooted in a time of incredible turmoil.
Yeah.
So where does chapter 9 actually fit into all of this?
Well, chapters 8 and 9 actually describe what's called the 7 trumpet judgments.
7 trumpet judgments.
7 trumpet judgments.
Okay.
And each trumpet blast basically unleashes a calamity on Earth.
Okay.
So the first 4 trumpets actually bring all this devastation
Okay.
through plagues of hail and fire, the sea turning to blood, and the sky going dark.
So it's like hitting all the biblical disaster highlights.
It's like a greatest hits
Yeah.
of biblical disasters.
Building up to something even worse.
Exactly, building up the suspense. And the article calls the 5th trumpet the point where things get really intense.
It does.
And that is where we encounter, dun-dun-dun, the demonic locusts.
Yes, yes.
Oh, this part always gave me the chills.
It is one of the most vivid passages in Revelation.
For sure.
The article quotes the text, describing these locusts as like horses prepared for battle with faces of men.
What?
Yeah.
They have faces of men?
Faces of men, hair of women, teeth of lions.
No way. This is so creepy.
They even sound like chariots.
Oh, come on. It's this really strange mix of something you kind of recognize,
Yeah.
but then something completely alien.
Right, like you'd never imagine it.
Never imagine it.
It's like something out of a nightmare.
It is.
Just a swarm of these creatures descending upon the world. And the article really leans into this whole fear factor.
It does.
I mean, stay home if you see this.
Right.
Like, come on.
Like, lock the doors.
Yeah, exactly. But what's the deeper meaning here?
Right.
What do these locusts actually represent?
That is where the interpretation gets really interesting.
Okay.
The article offers a few different possibilities.
Okay.
One of them is that they could be a symbol for modern military technology,
Okay.
specifically something like armed helicopters
Okay.
used by a powerful tyrannical government.
I can see that.
And the imagery of, breastplates of iron,
Yeah.
wings that sound like chariots.
It really lends itself to that interpretation.
It really does.
But the article also says that these locusts could represent a global government.
Yes.
Some kind of giant, oppressive bureaucracy that controls everybody's lives.
That's another possible interpretation.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen in our world how technology can be used for control.
Oh, absolutely.
For surveillance.
I agree.
And throughout history.
Yeah.
We've seen how economic exclusion has been used to marginalize and control populations.
Oh, yeah.
Through technology.
I mean, think about things like restrictions on travel.
Exactly.
Or on resources, or even the ability to buy and sell.
Right. Access to basic necessities.
Yeah, it's scary.
The locusts, with their power to torment and restrict movement, could be seen as this chilling premonition of those very real anxieties.
Yeah, so we're talking about something that goes beyond just, like, physical destruction.
It does.
It's about control.
Absolutely.
It's about these systems that can limit your freedom and inflict suffering.
That's right.
And this is where it gets interesting because there's this detail that the article points out.
Okay.
That these locusts are only allowed to torment those who don't have the quote-unquote seal of God.
The seal of God.
What is that? And who gets it?
Well, that's where we start to get into some of the, theological complexities.
Okay, right.
Revelation.
Yeah.
But the seal of God is essentially a mark of divine protection.
Okay.
It's a sign that you belong to God and that you're under his care.
So it's like a spiritual shield.
Yes, a spiritual shield.
Protecting you from the forces of darkness.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's contrasted with something we're going to talk about later.
Oh, boy.
Called the mark of the beast, which basically means the opposite.
Okay.
So it signifies allegiance to evil.
Okay.
And that you are not under God's protection.
All right. So we've got these demonic locusts.
Yeah.
Tormenting anyone without God's protection.
Right.
This idea of seal that sets certain people apart. What happens next?
Well, the sixth trumpet sounds.
Uh-oh.
And this unleashes another wave of destruction.
Oh, no. Things are about to get even worse.
They are. And this time, it's not locusts.
It's not.
No.
What is it?
It's 4 angels.
Angels.
Yeah, who have been bound at the Euphrates River.
Oh.
And they're unleashed.
Now this doesn't sound good.
And they are given the power to kill 1/3 of humankind.
1/3 of all people.
1/3.
That is a staggering number.
It is.
Wow. What's the significance of the Euphrates River here?
Yeah, it feels like more than just a random location.
It does.
You're right. The Euphrates has a lot of historical and symbolic weight.
Okay.
I mean, it's considered the cradle of civilization, the birthplace of agriculture, of organized societies.
Wow.
And in the ancient world, it also was like a symbolic boundary.
Oh.
Separating the known from the unknown, the civilized world from the wild.
I see.
So in this passage, the fact that it's drying up, well, that signifies a major, major upheaval.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
It is.
So it's not just about physical destruction then.
Yeah.
It's about the collapse of all these systems and structures that we rely on.
The things that kind of, hold our world together and make it feel stable.
Right.
It really adds another layer to this apocalyptic imagery.
It really does.
And it raises some really big questions.
Yeah.
Like, why this specific large-scale destruction?
Right.
Is this meant to be taken literally, or is it symbolic?
Or both.
Possibly. Of a deeper spiritual or societal breakdown.
Right. Okay.
Those are questions that people have been thinking about for centuries.
Well, before we go too deep into that, there's something else in this chapter that I want to unpack a little bit.
Okay.
The 144,000 who are sealed by God for protection.
Right. The 144,000.
Who are these people and what makes them so special?
Well, the article that we're using seems to lean towards a more literal interpretation.
Okay.
Suggesting that this is a specific group of people, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Wow, so they're chosen by God for a special purpose.
It seems that way. They're described as being celibate, pure, and marked with God's name.
So like an exclusive club, the VIPs of the apocalypse.
It is presented as a select group, that's for sure. A group set apart from the rest of humanity.
Right.
But what's interesting is that the article doesn't specifically say that salvation is limited to only these 144,000.
Oh, okay.
There is also mention of a great multitude from every single nation.
Okay.
Who are clothed in these white robes and standing in front of God's throne.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about your ethnicity or your family line.
Right.
It's about something more universal, something that goes beyond those boundaries.
It does suggest that God's grace and salvation are available to anyone who seeks them.
Okay.
regardless of their background or where they come from.
I see. So then what does it actually mean to be sealed by God?
Right.
What qualifies you to be part of that great multitude?
Good question. Well, the article suggests that the seal isn't like a physical mark. It's more of a spiritual one.
Oh.
It's about having, God's name written on your heart, so to speak.
So it's internal.
It is.
It's about some deep internal change that shows a true commitment to God's will.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, and that brings us back to the mark of the beast.
Yes.
Which the article says is basically the opposite of the seal of God.
It is. The mark of the beast represents being loyal to a corrupt and oppressive system.
Okay.
It's like a rejection of God's authority and a choice to follow evil.
Oh, wow.
And the article even suggests that this mark could be connected to technology.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like emerging technologies that control commerce, identification.
Like what?
Think digital IDs, biometrics, that sort of thing.
Okay, so those things that are becoming more and more common these days.
Exactly. And it's not hard to imagine how that kind of system could be used to exclude people.
Oh, yeah.
To create like a two-tiered society.
Where some people have access and some people don't.
Yeah. Exactly. Where those without the mark are, pushed to the margins and denied access to basic things they need to survive.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
Like something out of a dystopian novel.
It's a plausible scenario.
Yeah.
Especially as technology becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
Yeah. I mean, we've already seen how algorithms can discriminate against certain groups.
Right.
And how facial recognition is used for surveillance.
Yes, and how social media can be used to manipulate and control information.
Right. It's all very scary.
It is.
So this mark of the beast could be seen as a symbol of that kind of technological control.
A system that forces you to choose between compliance and being excluded.
That's a stark choice.
It is. It makes you wonder how we would navigate that kind of world.
Yeah, how do you figure out what's right and wrong?
Exactly. What's truly freeing and what's actually going to oppress you in the end.
That's a big question.
It is. It is.
But going back to the text.
Okay.
There's another part of the sixth trumpet that I want to point out. The article mentions these angels being released from the Euphrates.
Yeah.
And they are given the specific task of killing a third of humankind.
Right.
Why that number?
Yeah, what's the significance of that specific amount of destruction?
It seems very specific.
It does. It's a question that scholars have been wrestling with for a very long time.
So are there any good theories?
Well, some people think it's just symbolic.
Okay.
Representing, a significant portion of humanity.
But not necessarily a literal third?
Right. Others see it as like a foreshadowing of even greater destruction to come.
Oh, wow.
Like a down payment on the ultimate apocalypse.
It's interesting that the article doesn't really go into the deeper theological questions here.
Yeah, it doesn't, does it?
Like, if God is all loving and merciful,
right,
why would he allow this kind of suffering?
That's a question that a lot of people have when they read Revelation.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a valid question.
And it's one that has led to a lot of different interpretations of Revelation.
A lot of different interpretations. Some people emphasize God's justice and holiness.
Okay.
And suggest that this judgment is a consequence of humanity's rebellion against God.
Okay.
Others focus on the idea of divine sovereignty.
Right.
Arguing that God's ways are beyond our understanding and that we just have to trust in his plan, even if it seems harsh or confusing to us.
Right. It's not an easy answer. It really depends on your own theological perspective.
Right.
But either way, it's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
To think about how fragile human life is, the possibility of that kind of widespread destruction.
Absolutely.
And it reminds us that Revelation, with all its crazy imagery and cryptic symbolism,
is ultimately about very real human concerns.
Yeah.
It's fear and suffering and hope.
And just that search for meaning in a world that often feels really chaotic.
That's it. That's it, exactly.
Okay, so we've got these angels of destruction.
Yeah.
The Euphrates drying up. The 144,000.
Sealed for protection.
The mark of the beast.
Yes.
It's a lot to process.
It is a lot.
And then the article takes this interesting turn.
Yeah.
It brings in this very current geopolitical angle.
Right.
The role of China in the end times.
That's right. It suggests that the kings of the East, mentioned in Revelation, who gather at the dried up Euphrates, could represent a force led by China.
Whoa.
That will play a big part in this final battle between good and evil. It's a bold claim. It is. Connecting ancient prophecy to what's going on in the world today.
I mean, it's fascinating, but also kind of scary.
It is, and it's important to remember that this is just one interpretation of the text.
Of course.
But it does make you think about how we understand the relationship between biblical prophecy and current events.
Yeah, it does. Does Revelation give us a literal roadmap of the future?
Right.
Or is it more of a symbolic way to think about the spiritual forces at work in the world?
That's the big question.
I guess it depends on how you read it.
It really does.
But either way, it's fascinating to see how these ancient texts are still used to try and make sense of our world today.
Absolutely. It speaks to the power of revelation.
Yeah.
Its ability to resonate with people across different cultures and across time.
Even as the world changes.
That's it. Even as the world keeps changing and evolving around us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about angels and demons and plagues and seals, marks, and even China's role in the end times.
We have.
What's next in this wild ride through Revelation chapter 9? Well, just when you think it can't get any weirder. Chapter 9 throws another curveball at us.
Yeah.
A massive army, get this.
Okay. 200
million horsemen.
Oh, wow.
200 million!
This is another one of those passages that has caused a lot of debate and speculation.
I bet.
The article, it describes them with these breastplates of fire and sulfur.
What?
Lion heads and tails like serpents.
It's like some kind of sci-fi horror movie.
Yeah, it really is.
This crazy mix of like ancient mythology and futuristic warfare.
It's a really wild image. And then the sheer scale of it. 200 million horsemen.
It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
I mean, no human army has ever even come close to that size.
No, not even close. And that's why a lot of scholars think this number is symbolic.
Okay, could see that.
Representing just this vast, overwhelming force. And maybe a combination of actual armies, but also these more abstract forces.
Okay.
You know, like the forces of evil and chaos unleashed upon the world.
So it's not necessarily about a literal army of 200 million.
Right.
But more about the just overwhelming power.
The sheer power of those forces that are lined up against God.
In this final battle.
In this final conflict, yeah.
It's interesting how the article connects this back to the kings of the East we talked about earlier.
It does.
Suggesting that this massive army could be connected to, like, a Chinese-led force.
Right, and that this force will be a big part of the end times.
It's really interesting how the article brings those two things together.
It is.
You know, ancient prophecy and modern geopolitics.
Yeah, it adds a layer of intrigue to it all.
It does, especially when you think about what's going on in the world today.
It does. And while it's important to be, you know, critical of these interpretations, it's still really fascinating how Revelation sparks these conversations.
It does.
Even centuries after it was written.
So we've gone through plagues and demonic locusts and divine seals and angels of destruction.
We've covered a lot.
And even a potential connection to China.
Quite a journey.
What a deep dive this has been.
It has.
But before we wrap up,
okay,
I want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
All right.
Why does Revelation, with all of its crazy imagery and these kind of like outlandish prophecies, why does it still fascinate us?
That's the question, isn't it? Why does it resonate with people even today? I think it might be because it taps into some of our deepest fears and anxieties.
Oh, okay.
About the unknown, about how fragile life is, about the possibility of everything falling apart.
Right. It's like this reflection of our own anxieties about the world. About all the threats that we see, whether they're real or just in our heads.
I think that's part of it.
But at the same time, Revelation also offers a little bit of hope.
It does.
Right? This vision of a world where good wins in the end.
Where good triumphs over evil.
Yeah.
Where justice prevails.
Yeah.
And where God's rule is finally established.
It's a powerful message, especially when the world feels so chaotic.
It is a powerful message.
Like a reminder that even when things are at their darkest, there's still reason to be hopeful.
There is.
To believe that things will eventually work out for the best.
And I think even on a deeper level, Revelation speaks to our need to find meaning.
Okay.
Our desire for purpose, that longing to understand our place in this grand scheme of things.
It's like a story that helps us make sense of it all.
It's a story, a narrative.
Yeah.
However complex and challenging it might be.
Right. It helps us connect the dots.
To see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Even if we don't understand all the little details along the way. And that's what makes Revelation so relevant, even today.
I see what you mean.
It makes us think deeply about the world, about our own beliefs and values, about the choices we make and the consequences of those choices.
So it's not just about predicting the future.
No.
It's about understanding the present.
It's about wrestling with those big questions that humans have always asked.
It's about finding your place in the world.
Exactly.
Wow, what an incredible journey this has been.
It has been quite a journey.
We've covered so much, from the symbolism of those demonic locusts to the geopolitical stuff about the kings of the East.
A lot to think about.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to check out the article we used today.
It's a great place to start.
It really is. It's a great starting point for exploring Revelation further.
It is.
And remember, the joy is in the discovery.
That's right.
It's about wrestling with these complex ideas and figuring out what they mean to you.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.